I got a knock on the door, opened it, and there was a jacked, bald dude covered in tattoos and piercings standing on my stoop. And as I looked beyond him, I saw my brand new white Honda Accord was hooked up to his tow truck. My car was being repossessed.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Gym Break Cast, where we sit down and talk to professionals in the industry and just kind of go through those visionary ideas and integrator ideas that kind of, come up to us during our normal daily gym break. I'd like to introduce a special guest today. He got brought over to me by a good friend of mine. Bill, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. Billy Hofacker, and I'm a gym owner. I've been a gym owner for a pretty long time, a decade and a half. But now my focus has shifted to helping people, lots of gym owners, improve their finances, to help them improve their life, to ultimately help them make a greater impact with the people that they come across.
That's
I can
beautiful.
I can share like how that started if that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Why don't you share a little bit about how the journey started with the studio, and then we can kind of move forward and how you've evolved and started through the finance side.
Absolutely. Going back 15 years ago, I thought I was living the dream. I was married to my lovely wife, Melissa, who's now still my wife, my current my current wife and my only wife. And we are about to have our fifth child.
Wow.
But going way back to the 15-year ago mark, I had been a business owner since I formed my first LLC. I think it was November of 2000, which is crazy. That was like 24 years ago. But like a lot of trainers, I started off just doing what I was able to do. I had less than no money. I was working in gyms as an independent contractor. I worked at one point for I was called like a gym on wheels. It was this big box truck that I drove up to. At that point, it was like, I guess, relatively well-off people's houses who would come in the truck, and I would train them. So I did all types of things there. During that time, I was also a professional martial artist for years, which we can get into or not. But about 15 years ago, as I was getting ready to head over and work with my clients, I got a knock on the door, opened it, and there was a jacked, bald dude covered in tattoos and piercings standing on my stoop. And as I looked beyond him, I saw my brand new, not my brand new Ferrari or supercar, but my brand new white Honda Accord was hooked up to his tow truck. My car was being repossessed. I was confused. And you wouldn't really think that I'd be confused, but I was. I didn't understand what was happening. I was embarrassed. What if my neighbors see? What am I gonna tell my wife who's inside? And I was angry. I was angry at myself. Deep down, I knew it was my fault. That led to some difficult conversations with my wife and a discovery. And a discovery is the correct word here. I was unaware of our situation, which is crazy when I look back, but we had $130,000 in debt. We had difficult conversations. We were a family. We did all types of things, sacrifice. I'm kind of speeding through a little bit or a lot, but in 5 short years, we were able to pay off all of that 130K. And that was predominantly through the gym. Like I would say it was like at least 90% of that was because of the gym. There were a couple of other things. And then fast forward another 8 years, and we became completely debt free, paying off a total of $500,000. And I share all that, and the reason why I'm here is I know what it's like. It's a long time ago. Sometimes it's hard to get back there because I've kind of removed myself from there. But I know what it's like to, and I still know what it's like to have financial challenges. That's a I think a myth that I mean, this is not the encouraging point that people want to hear, but I don't know. I mean, I guess there's some point, but I heard recently there was a guy who was a billionaire, and somebody asked him, I said, when did you stop worrying about money? And I always fell off the chair when I heard this. He's like, yeah, a few years ago, I really stopped worrying about it. But at that point, he was already worth like hundreds of millions of dollars. And I don't know if that's typical, but I will say that it's not this point that you get to. Money is a great servant, but a terrible master. Money is meant to work for you. You're not supposed to work for the point, the money. It's not an end. It's a means to an end. And I've discovered that multiple times through my journey. And even now, I mean, it's like when it rains, it pours. We got like 3 appliances that broke like in the last like week or so, right? So there's always going to be things to deal with. There's a lot less stress now than there was, but I'm just super passionate about helping people. I'm sort of like I guess, a financial nerd on one hand, not like an academic type nerd, but a sort of like a financial practical nerd. I love to see how the finances relate to the business and how we tie all that in to the goals and the roadmap. It's kind of like a puzzle in some ways. So I guess my logical, practical side really appreciates that. And then there's a lot more to it than that. There's the mindset, there's how it affects every other area in your life. And that's what we saw is like our marriage improved, our relationships improved, the business improved. When your finances are better in the right way, not when it's an obsession to the point where it's an idol, but when you are taking care of your money, your life is going to be better. Similar to how if you take care of your body, and I feel the same way about that. And I don't know, they're close. They're like two favorite, try to choose a favorite kid, like fitness and finances. Like I really do value both tremendously. I just find the finances, I think it's just because of my unique path of being a gym owner and having the financial journey. If I had to choose one, that really lights me up, something about it. I obviously for myself and for my clients, I also am passionate about fitness as well. So I have those two passions, and I've sort of figured out how to connect them and share my experience with others, and that's through private coaching and through fractional CFO stuff, and do a bunch of different services for gym owners and people.
No, that's great. I think one thing you really said there that I want to kind of touch on a little bit, and I want to kind of dive in a little bit in a deeper, if you're willing to,
Yeah.
uh, is the spectrum of you talked about, these billionaires who always talk about, and it's true. I mean, I would think still to this day you're financially free, and though you may still have a lot more relief,
Mhm.
money is always going to be something that we have to pay attention to. And I'll just say that, pay attention to.
Yeah.
But what did you have to do as a business owner to change your mindset, to kind of allow yourself to look at money differently? Because I think there's a contradictory when I see a lot of people, and I'll just give this as an example. When you start to have an emotional tie towards money, you end up actually spending it on the wrong things because you get desperate, and that actually kind of puts you in debt.
Mhm.
It was once I started utilizing money as an energy and understanding money is going to flow. We're going to have ups and downs. We're going to have different periods of business, that I was able to start looking at money in a lot more healthier perspective. So, how did you kind of go about that when you were in debt? You went through your phase, you lost everything. What kind of really helped you kind of start to look at money differently? Because I'll say, if you have a really deep emotional tie to money, it's hard to pay off debt. Like you
Yeah.
don't want to, because you feel like you're losing your money to pay off debt that you kind of in reality may not have to pay off in some circumstances.
Yeah, man, that's a really interesting question. I feel like we could have like 17 podcast episodes about that. It's really, really good. There are a few things that come to mind as I try to organize my thoughts. I will say, and this may not be super duper helpful for people. I do think that I am wired in a way to be resilient, and I think that that is going to be a tremendous advantage for someone. I don't know how conscious this was, but I had overcome a lot in my life. This was an area that I was obviously failing at, but I think I was able to, at some level, I don't know where it was because it was missing for a while, but at some level, I knew that I could figure this out. Like I knew I can do this. I'm gonna do whatever it takes. And you mentioned about the emotions, and I have two thoughts on that. One is there's so much research on this. I'm actually reading a book right now by the Heath brothers called Switch, and it's all about change. And they've done a lot of research. And this idea, like with goals, is like they don't really work if there's not emotion connected to it. Like if you just say to yourself, "Oh, I want to make $100,000, or I want to make $1 million, or I want to have $1 million," it doesn't really change you. It does. You're not really gonna do the things you need to do to get there. It's not until you can they have these different terms. They call it the elephant. It's like your emotional side. It's not until you connect that in a major way that you're going to be able to do the things and do the changes that you need to do. And as I think, I try to, where did that happen for me? And I don't know exactly, but I will say that I got so emotionally connected to the whole issue. Some of it was negative, but I got so mad. I got so frustrated that here I was. I felt like I was, I don't know, like duped or something. And it was like partly by myself. Like, how did I get to this point? Like, why? Like, why? Like, how could I have been so stupid? I used to look at people that were, let's say, 100 pounds overweight and not proud of this, but I would say, what were you thinking? Like, didn't you realize at the, I don't know, like the 37th Twinkie that it was not going well for you? But I realized that was such an immature thought because I did the same thing. It was just with something that wasn't as easily seen. And just like, and I don't want not to turn this into a therapy session, but just like those people have underlying issues why that happens. There's all types of things. There's insecurities. They don't feel good enough. They're not worthy. I had some stuff underneath all of it, and I'm still, even 15 years later, it's so much better, but I'm not there. I'm still working through things, and I probably will to my last breath. So I think it's sort of two points to that. One is the underneath. Like if you look at like the Titanic, there's a bunch of chairs on the top deck, and you can move those chairs and place them perfectly, but they're not staying there because there's the underneath stuff that's really moving things around. And that's what happens with a lot of people. Like they don't realize, why am I good at making money, but I can't save any? And it's like, I just need to figure out this skill or this system. But really what they need to do is process why they're not saving. Is it because they're trying to buy their happiness? They're trying to prove something to other people to be somebody that they're really not. I mean, there's all types of possibilities there, but that's not really talked about. And it's like the Band-Aid thing doesn't really work. It's part of it. Like you do need to take action. You need to have a plan. You need to follow through. But why is it that it's so difficult for people? And for me, it was so that was the underneath stuff. But then there was like the practical things where my wife and I doing it together was tremendous. We were also both very resilient in that because we could have given up, but we stuck with it. And that was just monumental, is having somebody else that I was doing it with. So I encourage couples to get on the same page with their finances. Yeah, easier said than done. And if the person is single, then they still need support. They need a coach, they need a friend, they need some accountability because we all know the value of having that support. And then just little by little, even now, like there's constantly new possibility. Like even with my business, I'll just be completely transparent. Is like when I first started, I was like, yeah, is this really going to be a thing? Like, are people really going to want to pay me to help with their finances when they're already struggling with finances? And I'm like, whew, they actually will, because it's worth it for them, because this is a big deal. And then as time goes by, you think, wow, what else can I do? Maybe I could help them with their bookkeeping, and then maybe I can help them with fractional CFO. I can start working with bigger gyms, and now I can help them build wealth. I mean, but it didn't start that first day. First, it was like I want to just help people get out of debt. Now that's really not so much of what that's the least of what I do now. So things evolve. You start maybe getting bigger dreams, bigger visions, and the same thing with the money. Like, let's start with tracking our spending. Okay, interesting. Like there's quite a bit of money here that is being directed in an area that we don't want it to be. What happens if we direct it here? Hmm. Wow, maybe I can do this. Maybe I am capable of doing this. So I think it's like that combination of those little steps that sort of give you the identity that you need, that I am somebody who's capable with money. A lot of us don't have that for lots of reasons, predominantly because our parents or caregivers didn't show us what it looked like to be responsible with money. They either argued about it, which is completely unhealthy. I mean, arguing like in an unhealthy way, and they just never talked about it. And what does that do? What are you saying? What are you saying to your children by never talking about money, which is obviously one of the most important parts of life? Not the most important, but it's very important. And we never talk about it. So that shows the kid either that it's bad, or that it's not important. And both of those can be flawed and create unhealthy behaviors in them, and it just gets passed all around. So those things are crucial to work through.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that there's something in there that you said that is quite interesting to me because when I look back to my childhood, my parents owned a business. It wasn't in the studio space, but they were it was a retail sort of store. Big luxury, I'll say. They sold spas. So they sold something in the athletics because they sold them to athletes, but they just weren't the greatest at money. And I actually ended up doing the opposite. I looked at what gave me happiness was saving.
Mhm.
And so, and this is going to kind of lead to my next question here because I think that there is multiple ways to be unhealthy with money. And one is, yes, from a personal or from a business perspective, you're just spending money on things because you're desperate and you're getting your self-validation through like what you think the business is supposed to be. Uh, and then you have vice versa, which was something that I had to really work on, which was, hey, like, why am I saving all this money? You know, like I don't need it to be happy. Like I have kids now, and there's other things to be happy. Yeah. So, and I always say this is you'll say too, money is a part of a business. So no matter how much you focus on people and you focus on culture and you focus on,
Agreed.
you still have to be a good leader and know, hey, I have to be straight with you here, and like, hey, I'm not going to pay you that, or vice versa. So with that said, when you were getting into your business side and you said, "Hey, the gym itself started bringing home much more personal income," how were you able to look at the finances and delegate your money effectively to be able to one pay you more money, but two help the studio still grow?
When I look back now, it's interesting because, thankfully I've done pretty well. And once in a while when I get into my negative mode, I'll start thinking, man, I had like even just the 130 that I shared in that story. Like, can you imagine if I didn't have that? And we're all where we're at for a reason. I believe all that, but I can't help but sometimes have those thoughts. If I would have only invested that money 15 years ago, that alone would have been probably millions in the long run. Maybe I could have opened up more gyms. Who knows? Like what would have happened if I had that cash to free up? So I had to your point, I had to find a very delicate balance. And this is something I do help people when I work with private clients is figuring out where are the best places for those dollars, because every single dollar that you spend, it comes with an opportunity cost. If you're putting $500 towards marketing, that's $500 that you're not putting in your pocket. And it might be a wonderful idea to put it into marketing, but you do want to analyze that and figure out where is the best place for those dollars. As I was going through that, and sometimes I still have these thoughts of was that the right, like we paid off our house, which was a lot of money, and I still sometimes second guess that. I am ultimately glad I did it, but that's a lot of money I could have done something else with. And you start thinking through that, I leaned towards working through personal goals as a big priority. Other people, I think either extreme is potentially dangerous. If you starve your business of cash so that you can get ahead personally, your business could suffer because then you maybe don't have enough to hire the best people, and that could make your business struggle. And the flip side, this is I think more common is, so I'm glad you asked that because I'd love to get this message out there. I think the more common scenario is the opposite of mine, because possibly people, they don't feel as much of a need. They feel like maybe things are okay. But I would, not to scare people, but I would caution people, are things okay? Like, do you have enough for the long term? Are you going to be able to take care of yourself? Because you don't want to be relying on other people, and you want to think about that long-term vision you have for your life. A business is there to serve you, and yes, to serve your customers, but it's there to serve you. So you really want to think through that. So they put all of their eggs into their gym business, And nothing's guaranteed. Like, hopefully that works out really well for you. But I've been working with, I don't have the number, but I've either worked with or been around a lot of gym owners. I I know a handful that sold for, let's say, seven figures or something significant, but that's a really small percentage of the total.
Mhm.
And not only that, but you also want to be thinking through the years that are not that distant. Like, for example, just use myself as an example. I moved 1,000 miles from my facility to pursue something that I thought was a bigger part of my vision. And yeah, like in a lot of ways, I wish I didn't have to deal with all of that debt because I possibly could have been further. But because I was able to get a hold of it with some time, I was about 30 when I really started this wake up call, like 30, 31. Thankfully, I always wish I was younger. I wish it happened at 21, but thankfully I wasn't 41, 51, 61 because it gets harder. You can still do it. Don't get discouraged if you're a little bit older. Because I have clients I've helped get through things, but I got to a point where I was able to have enough freedom to say, hey, if we want to, we could actually live in a different part of the country. And you may or may not want that for yourself, but think about the things that you do want for yourself. Like, even from a personal lifestyle standpoint, do you want to be at the gym at 5 a.m. every single day, working till noon, maybe getting a few minutes for a half butt workout, and then having to be back and working Saturdays? It's really common. And yes, you have to do that for a period. Oftentimes, business is hard work, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. But if you're like in a stage with, like I am, where you have a bunch of kids, that's not gonna work. It's gonna be really hard to balance that kind of schedule because somebody's taking the brunt of that. And if that's your spouse, that's not gonna go well. Your kids are gonna, I mean, there's like all types of things. So if, if someone's in that scenario, that's fine. But thinking through, how can I use my gym business as a vehicle to get ahead personally, not just put every dollar into the gym? So that was like sort of like a broad answer, but to get more specific, I love the idea of having priorities. So this is a good question for people to ask themselves. And there's a couple different ways I could frame it, but one is, where is your next dollar going? Like, if I gave you $1, what are you going to do with it? So some examples are, it's going to go to pay off my debt, or it's going to go to pay off my house, or it's going to go to pay off my car, or it's going to pay off my credit cards, or it's going to go to build savings for something that I need, or it's going to be to build long-term savings, or I'm going to take 50 cents and put it here and 50, however that looks for you. But having a plan for those dollars, I think is huge. Just like you have a plan of what you're doing at the gym. And then another way to frame that is just with a large amount. Like, if I give you 10,000, like I could answer that question. Like, if you gave me, I could answer it super specifically. Like, if you gave me $10,000, I could actually tell you, well, you know what I would do with that is I would take 20% of it and I would give it away. I would take X percentage of it and I would put it towards some kind of fun spending for my family. I would take a certain percentage of it and I would put it into investing. And I think that's a really good thing to know, because if not, you're probably not optimizing your finances. And it's possible to hear that and think, oh my goodness, that sounds so restrictive. Like, I have to have a place for all my money. I am telling you that it is the exact opposite of that. Having a plan actually helps you to feel more free because it sets boundaries, it sets guardrails. Like, we have a pretty large food budget, like a lot of kids, and we eat healthy, but we still have an amount that we stay within. You can exceed anything, right?
Yep.
Like, I think about that. If you're like Warren Buffett, like, to you and I, it might seem like he can never spend all his money, but the truth is he can, because he doesn't have everything in the world. He doesn't, uh, the Gates Foundation, like, they have to choose, we're going to fight this big cause, whether it's malaria or whatever it is, but I can't like tackle like 100 different world issues because I have to allocate certain resources to certain things. And it's the same exact thing for us, just on a much smaller level. And that's a powerful concept.
Yeah, it's the vision, right?
Yeah.
Not just the personal vision, but kind of looking at the vision of your studio. And there's one more topic I wanna kind of talk through on this because, you know, I'm in branding, I'm in marketing, and one of the big things I see when I'm working with studios myself is they'll come to us, for instance, and they'll be in desperation mode, right? They'll be like, "Oh, you need to get us we need 100 leads tomorrow. We need 100 new members tomorrow." And the first thing that I look at is I say, all right, if that's where your mindset is right now, you're not necessarily in marketing mode. You're in operations mode, my friend. Like, you need to fix your operations before you come to us, because no marketing is going to fix bad operations, which, funny enough, makes it very hard for me in particular to make sales because I'm not just going to sell you marketing. And so when you got to a point with the health of your gym and what you see as a fractional CFO when
Mhm.
you're working with these gyms, and you're doing exactly what you just did with, hey, if I give you $1, you would split it. Do you feel like most of the studios you work with try to bootstrap their marketing? Do you kind of say, hey, you should put 10% of this dollar to marketing? This is an energy that's going to help you bring more business. And with that said, do you feel like there's a certain stage in their growth cycle that those the your fractional CFO kind of mentality and kind of breaking stuff out really starts to take root and help a studio really evolve to that next stage?
I think so. I'm a big fan. Part of this comes from my background as a as a self proclaimed bootstrapper. I mean, I started my gym. I didn't get to this part in the story, but I started my gym right after that story. So can you imagine, like, I had, I had my net worth was so in the negative, is ridiculous. And I had this it was called a boot camp. It's actually still is. But it was like what you would think of a boot camp. It was large group. I had a job as a full-time martial artist at the time. That debt, by the way, was not from my gyms. It was from previous things, all types of things. Won't have to get into that now. And I just share that because they were separate. That was mostly personal debt. I had a little bit of IRS debt, but most of that debt was just personal things. And I had no choice. I had to bootstrap. So our first facility was subleased out of a tiny hole in the wall soccer facility. It was not nice. We did our best. I decided, to your point, to focus on the customer and give them an experience that they wouldn't care how nice the gym was. In fact, I think it turned into an advantage. And it was like, you guys are awesome. You're showing up here and the paint is peeling off the wall and we're going to get to a better spot. This is huge. I'm glad you asked that because I think this is a great takeaway for people. This short phrase, it's 2 words, will change your business. And I would say 90, I'm making this up, but just my assumption based on my experience, 95% of people are not going to follow it and you're not going to see the benefits because of it. The words are thank you. And you might be thinking that you have said that to your clients, but I really want you to think about that. I went bananas with gratitude. As we're recording this a week after Thanksgiving, super appropriate. I was constantly thanking them, hey, I just want to thank you for coming today because I realize that we're small, we're just starting out, and that means the world to me. And I believe that helped our retention and our business so much. So I'll fast forward a little bit. So we outgrew that really quickly. Then we had no facility. So we were in New York and it was nice weather. It was the springtime. We took it outside, no rent. There was ups and downs, right? We like lost a bunch of clients. Again, like different story for a different day. Then I kind of got refocused, started building it back up. We subleased a larger space. A year later, we got our own space. A little bit after that, we expanded to a bigger space. It was like maybe 3 years later, we opened up a second place, but it was all gradual. We were growing at the speed of cash, meaning that I was not going to leverage myself more at that point because I wasn't able to. There's no way I would have been able to get money. So for that reason, I am a big fan of the bootstrapping as people are starting. Like I have a few clients that are in the very early stages, like they just opened, like literally just either like are opening now or just opened a couple months ago. And I mean, if they have a few extra bucks, I have no problem with them throwing a little bit of money into advertising. But I really like them focusing on just the grassroots, belly to belly type marketing, personal outreach, connecting with local businesses, testimonials, referrals, just real, because you're the face of the business at that point. You're there all the time. You have those relationships. It's a great way to grow the business early on. But then yeah, there's going to be a point where there's going to be competitors. They're spending lots of money on marketing, and if you want to grow, I don't know. I don't know if I know of any. Maybe there's a unicorn somewhere, but like large gym businesses that don't do paid advertising. So yeah, at some point, where is that point? I mean, we could throw a random number out there, but I would say if a gym is under like 10K a month, that it should probably be focusing more on just driving that business and driving that those leads themselves. But then after that, yeah, we can start thinking about yeah, let's allocate whether it's a percentage of revenue. I know there's like numbers, whether it's 10%, 50%, 20%. I mean, there's some different factors to consider there, but I think that's great. But more importantly, it's to really measure those dollars and track how that marketing, because I have clients, one in particular, just currently, who was spending a lot of money on marketing that was producing nothing. And it's like, hey, if you're spending like 2 or 3 thousand bucks a month and you're not getting anything out of it, I'm putting that money in my pocket all day rather than spending it on something that's not producing any return. And the flip side is true. I heard people say, hey, I'm trying to save money. I'm thinking about cutting my market. Well, hold on. Like, these Facebook ads are like driving all of your leads. So unless you have a way to replace those, substitute that, you gotta look at that. So there's a couple of areas I like to caution people to cut back too much. One is marketing. Two is personal development within reason. I mean, I see too many gym owners spending too much on personal development sometimes, especially like with these high-end masterminds. They're just not there. Like, there's nothing wrong with those things. I've been in there, but they almost like they think it's a magic bullet, where I love to just like scale with the business. The first thing I did when I had no money was I bought a book, and that was a little bit of a stretch for me,
Mhm.
right? And then I went to an event, and then I joined sort of like a lower investment type mastermind that was designed for businesses like me. So I think you want to be over your skis a little bit. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we're doing that now. Like, my wife and I are investing in some marriage things. And it's like, yeah, like that's a little bit more than we wanted, but it's like, it's not going to crush us. It's just a little uncomfortable, and we'll make that work. But we're not going to go and just completely spend way more than we have and just ruin our financial position over it.
Yeah, it's a hard shift. I mean, when I have prospects come to me, it's one of those situations. I call it you get stuck in validation mode. And it's this spectrum, and I see it somewhere around the 250 to 300 a year mark,
Mm-hmm.
where they come to me and I kind of see something similar to you. Like, for instance, if they come to me and they're like, hey, we want to develop this great brand, I'm like, dude, you're just starting out. You don't need a brand until you're ready to build culture and you're ready to build a solid team and all that stuff. But vice versa, they'll have like 6 different marketing directions going on, and I'm like, let me ask you a question. Where is your conversion rate coming from? And they're like, oh, well, it comes from our walk-ins. And I'm like, not our challenges. I'm like, then why are you spending $3,000 to $4,000 a year? You're not at the point yet where I'm not saying challenges aren't good and trying to bring doing a deal at the end of the year good, but like ads, for instance, are really meant for mass e-com and large gym scenarios. Or the cost per click isn't there, or you're at the very beginning and you have to hustle and get on low quality calls, right? And I'm a big believer that referrals are still to this day, especially for the gym community. You just have to find a what I call a sustainable model of utilizing referrals to bring in more business. Uh,
Right.
Stop looking at 8 different marketing, find the one that's working and stick with that. And not until you get to a certain point when you feel like you can invest more in marketing, do you test another channel to kind of complement that first channel. I want to hear more about when you lost your a lot of your clients and the mental stuff. So maybe what we'll do, since we're getting close to the end of this, maybe you and I, when the time seems right, we'll try to have you back on the cast, and we'll go a little bit deeper
Yeah.
into that psychological counterpart of your growth cycle. But for now, we'll leave it at that. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you?
I think the best place, thanks for the opportunity there. I think the best place would be, you could just find me on social media. It's Billy Hofacker. And you can just shoot me a message if you want to connect. I do have a podcast as well. It's called Your Fitness Money Coach. You can check that out if you want to hear more of the content. You could email me. It's financialfreedompt@gmail.com. And yeah, I can always send you links so people can book calls and all that stuff, whatever is easier.
All right, sounds good. Well, again, thank you for being on the next episode of the Gym Break Cast, and we will have you on again soon.
Awesome, Zach. Thank you, brother.